Hi, thank you so much for spending some time with us this afternoon. Please open up by sharing a little bit about who you are, what you do, and how you came to be involved in space.
Right. Well, okay. So I've been excited about space exploration since the 60s. Uh, the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo programs. So I was just as a teenager and a young student, I was just really enthralled with the whole situation. And when I was in college, I started watching Star Trek. Okay, like so many millions of other people, and quite honestly, I had visions of at some point being involved in space activities, but as we all know, the space kind of went on the back burner after we landed men on the moon, and it was a great disappointment to me. But shortly thereafter, in the middle 70s, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me say that in 1970, I accepted a job fresh out of college to work in the aerospace industry. And at the time, the aerospace industry was going through a significant downsizing on the West Coast in California, which is where I was at the time. So I accepted a job offer from Pratt and Whitney in Connecticut, and so here's a California boy going to Connecticut to get the job of his dreams. And one thing led to another, and I ended up having more than 40 years of experience with Pratt and Whitney, both full time and after I retired, part time. And I found myself getting more and more interested and involved in aerospace and space in particular. In the middle 70s, there was a person called Gerard O'Neill. And for those of us that are excited about space and space settlement, Gerard O'Neill kind of put an interesting presentation and series of books together concerning colonizing space. And so I found myself getting re-energized by Gerard O'Neill's presentations and his books. And for what it's worth, it turns out that the National Space Society, which I've been a member of now for at least 15, maybe 20 years, has his book and papers on file, so that anyone who joins the National Space Society can go to the library and get his works. And I was just trying to think about, there was a recent article that was prepared concerning Gerard O'Neill and his life, and it was written up in the Ad Astra magazine. Now I'm just going to hold up the cover of the Ad Astra magazine. I don't know if you can see that or not. It's probably not in perfect focus. There we go.
There, back and forth. Yeah,
is
there it
is
is.
that a little better? Right. And so on the front cover of this issue is the Spacex Starship, which for those of us that are excited about space, we're glad to see that happen. And there's an article in this issue called The High Frontier, which is what Gerard O'Neill's book is called. And there was a recent article and review of Gerard O'Neill's life. And this is, okay, I got to work on focus. There we go. Those are some of the pictures that you can see in his article. So in his magazines, or actually his books. And I have 3 copies, it turns out, of his books. The first version, the second version, and the original paper version from the Library of Congress. So in any event, that was a lot of fun reading about that. And I continue to go back and look at it from time to time and think about it. You can't see it in the background behind me, but I have a library of space articles and books and so forth. So it's a passion for me, and I'm really involved. Uh, Obviously, as a space ambassador, I like to talk about it. So um, the other thing I would say is that, okay, I belong to several space societies. I belong to the Planetary Society and to the National Space Society. The thing that I really like about the National Space Society is that they have a heavy emphasis on the human presence in space. And I'm going to quote their vision, which I happen to love. And Kevin, you know this because you got a cup with this on it. But the space ambassadors, our vision, and this is the vision for the entire National Space Society, is people living and working in space in thriving communities beyond the Earth, using the vast resources of space for the dramatic betterment of humanity. And so that's the National Space Society vision. I happen to really like that vision a lot. And for what it's worth, there are several famous individuals besides Gerard O'Neill and space enthusiasts that happen to share that vision. Jeff Bezos of Amazon fame, now working through Blue Origin, has a similar vision, but he puts a number on it. He says millions of people living and working in space. And obviously, Elon Musk from SpaceX has got a similar vision where he wants to put people on Mars, wants to start a city on Mars. I don't have quite as grand a vision for our presence in space, but I look forward to the next major step in space, which I hope will happen in the next 10 to 20 years, which will be several outposts on the moon.
Right.
And I've written several articles about and presentations about human presence on the moon and what we would do. Clearly, there is a lot of opportunity.
Absolutely.
All we have to do is we have to get there, though, you see.
Absolutely. So, you even more so than myself, you lived at a time that you saw us go from we can barely get off the Earth to we walked on the moon. And am I right in remembering that Werner von Braun, he had a vision of being on Mars by the 80s or 90s, but
yes,
we lost our way, right? We always seem to have lost our way periodically. What do you see as far as the future, how the future is now, right? With these, if nothing else,
right.
The commercialization of space and the money that these billionaires are putting into, with their own money, into the space program.
Right. So, okay, a couple of thoughts. The first is what I see happening is initially a couple of bases on the moon. It's not going to be just one base. There are no fewer than 6 entities, and I'll use that term entities because some of them are governments, some of them are not, that plan to put moon bases up and to start working on the moon. And so the immediate steps, as I see it, will be the ability to get to the moon and to do so on a regular basis, and then to start using the lunar resources. And we will do that probably robotically initially. The opportunity is huge for several types of materials that we would be able to use in construction in space. And then on top of that, there's the volatiles that we're looking into, and that's the first exploration exercise at the poles to get to the volatiles that can be used for a number of things, fuel and for life support. So, but once we start that activity and we are doing it regularly, then there will be the beginning of an enterprise activity in cislunar space. And I think that's really important I think that going to Mars before we have lunar bases and enterprise in the Earth Moon system is premature. I have on several occasions said we're getting ahead of ourselves here if we do a Mars base before we perfect it on the moon. And I have said on several occasions at presentations that I've given that there really isn't a whole lot of difference between the Mars surface and the lunar surface. You can get into arguments about materials and whatnot, but the fact of the matter is Mars does not have much of an atmosphere. So it also doesn't have as much sunlight intensity as the moon does. So the opportunities on the moon, I think, are better than they are on Mars right now. So,
yeah, a lot of folks say that if we're going to colonize Mars, it must be from the moon, right? Because it takes 50 times less energy just to get into orbit. And again, as you said, utilize those resources.
Well, it's safer too, right? The idea that you've got a stopping point. If you use it as an outpost, as you say, it's natural to have that there first before you're going any farther, even for refueling or something along those lines.
Right. And actually, I guess I would drive an argument that says that you really want to perfect your abilities close to home before you try to reach further. And there's, as you point out, there's a safety feature to that. You're closer to the Earth.
Yeah.
But I think also that all the resources we need to prove the point are there on the moon. And I don't know if you had a chance to look at my presentation at the ISDC this last year. It was a virtual conference. But I make a point for setting up a series of bases on the moon, both surface and subsurface, in the lava tubes that exist. And there are plenty of these relatively large lava tubes. Now, we can debate the issues. There are those that say, no, we don't know enough about the lava tubes yet. And that's true, we don't. But that's all a part of the exploration of the moon that we need to do. We need.
Well, those tubes would help reduce. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say that we really didn't explore the moon well enough when we went the first time.
Her question is about for our audience that may be less knowledgeable. The advantage of using the lava tubes is for what?
Okay, so there are actually two primary opportunities. The first one is they provide a large volume that is protected from radiation and from micrometeorites. Okay, the con to that is that, well, yeah, but some of the lava tubes have collapsed. Well, yes, that's true, they have. And so using the lava tubes for available space would require that we do some engineering work ahead of time to make sure that we're safe. Okay, so that aside for now, the other point that I would make that makes the lava tubes particularly valuable is that they are large and long, and they will probably have access to other resources. There could very well be volatiles in the lava tubes, particularly at some of the higher latitudes. And more importantly, we know that a lot of precious minerals are present in lava and come up in subsurface lava. Magma has a lot of the precious metals like gold and silver and so forth. So we really don't know what we're going to find until we explore the lava tubes, and clearly that's really important.
Excellent. What is when we talk about colonizing the moon or settling the moon in a more permanent fashion, where do you see economics and private enterprise in that equation versus simply nations?
Okay, yes, well, that's a very good question. It turns out that the moon has several metal resources, or just say resources, period, that can be utilized fairly quickly. I did a report concerning the various minerals and metals that would be available, the amount of energy required to extract them and use them. And one of the first things that crops up is iron, steel. Depending upon where you are on the surface of the moon, you can have as much as 12% iron available just for magnetically harvesting it. Much like you harvest iron in a sandbox with a magnet. So, and it turns out that the energy required to make iron is relatively low compared to what would be required to make aluminum. Okay, right. Which is frequently quoted as one of the big things that we can use on the moon. Well, no, iron is going to be the first one because that requires the least amount of energy. Another element that is useful is glass. Glass is very, silicon dioxide is very abundant on the moon. And so there is some refinement that would be required, but the fact of the matter is glass is readily produced. I mean, it was one of the first materials that humans ever produced on the earth was glass. So there's two elements right there that have industrial significance for major construction that we could use right off.
Absolutely, absolutely. It really is an interesting time that we live in with the confluence of technology and folks with wealth and vision, and maybe not so much I don't know if we're going to have another Cold War, but let me pivot a little bit to some geopolitics in space. What do you see as the relationship now in the next, let's say, 20 years between, say, the United States, China, and, well, let's just start there. The United States and China, how do you see them playing or not playing together on the moon?
Okay, so first of all, I would put a vote in that I hope that we would play together rather than be too adversarial. But let me also put a plug in for competition. Competition is a good thing if it's done well and done correctly. And, you know, if you look at the competition during the Cold War between the US and Russia, that competition had some positive results. And we didn't get into a self-destructive situation. Mm-hmm. And I believe that there's enough opportunity for the US and for China and for India and Japan and some of the other entities that are interested in getting to the moon. The Europeans, for example, basically most of these countries or entities are participating in the Artemis Accords to put in the Artemis station around the moon. So I see us as playing together and in some cases being a little competitive, but that's not necessarily bad. Okay. Right. For example, we can become complacent in the Western society. And so having someone kicking our bucket a little bit and saying, hey, look what we're doing is probably a good thing.
Right. Yes, I totally agree. In my little world where I work with these small sats, small CubeSats, which some will be sent on the first Artemis mission, they'll be deployed from the Orion. One thing I've noticed is even African nations, which have virtually very, very little space assets of their own, they're excited about space, right? They're eagerly wanting to be more involved and have their own space programs. Do you anticipate nations that maybe have very little resources in space to this point might eventually be a part of what we're doing on the moon?
Oh, absolutely. There's an interesting opportunity, I believe, once we get back to the moon to start putting in telerobotic systems to do exploration and extraction of materials. And there's uh, for those of us that are familiar with remote control, I mean, I fly remote control airplanes, and I enjoy doing it. And it puts a stake in the technology and the potential of the technology to allow us to work remotely. And some of my associates from the flying club actually have drones that have cameras on them, and they have first person video. So the ability for a person to run a vehicle on the moon with telepresence is real today. There's no reach for the technology at this point. In fact, there are some systems that provide not just first person video, but also provide telepresence, meaning the ability to sense,
Yes.
to feel.
Haptic sensors. Yes.
That's right. So you're really only limited by what your imagination wants to have, number one. Number two, the technology can step up and provide you with any senses that you feel you need, whether it be infrared vision or ultraviolet vision or tactile senses. All of those are possible.
I think that's very interesting that some of the access that people will have to space, and I've never heard it put quite like you said, is that because of augmented reality and remote control of hardware, you can be exploring the moon or extracting the resources comfortably from your office somewhere here on Earth. I think that's course,
right.
That's the only place we can do it with the delay, right? With the 1 second delay. But I definitely see that from a safety standpoint, right? In the early days, things will be much more dangerous. I just see a lot of upshots to that.
Right.
No.
So one of my questions, and as we are kind of getting towards the end, it would be about ambassadors in general. So, I've worked with a few colleagues from National Space Society, like Francis. I believe actually Francis did a podcast with us early on. And we know, gosh, who was it? It's Zelensky, right?
Yeah, Lynn
So
Zelensky.
I've met a few members. How do people get involved in the National Space Society or become an ambassador? What is the process for our teacher listeners?
Okay, very good. So the first requirement is to be a member of the National Space Society. And right now we've had an interesting series of applications. A lot of people get very enthused about being a space ambassador, hear about it, they apply through the National Space Society. But the one thing I would say is that to be a space ambassador, you have to have a high level of commitment. Okay, so if someone is just interested in putting a title out there, well, what we really want is we want people to give presentations to their communities and to their schools and to their associates or their friends. Get more people interested and involved in the space activity. This is a primary educational activity, and it's got a very personal touch to it, because a lot of people get interested in space, but they really don't do more than scratch the surface. And we really need to do more than scratch the surface, which is where the commitment part comes in. And right now, we have a number of different space ambassadors that are considered to be subject matter experts that give presentations on engineering activities or exploration experience that is unique, that we can tap and use to share with others. But on top of that, there's a lower level of space ambassador activity where we just make presentations and get people enthused. It can literally be current events. Okay, one of the current events are kind of interesting right now. Kevin, you started to touch on this a little bit, but we've got the opportunity to partake vicariously in the space tourism activity. Okay, we've got Virgin Galactic, we got Blue Origin. We just recently had a Inspiration 4 space mission that went for 3 days. And oh, by the way, you can get on Netflix and look at a 5-hour rendition of what they went through to prepare for that flight and the actual space flight, which was a hoot. Some of us not only watched the first 4 episodes, but then we were waiting for the 5th one to come out, which was the actual mission, which we were not disappointed. The 5th episode really documented the final mission quite well. So, and I would encourage anybody who's interested in space and wants to get involved, look at everything that's available online, join the National Space Society or any of the other societies that happen to match your interests, and get involved. Read the magazines and the articles. You know, the Ad Astra magazine from the National Space Society comes out 4 times a year, and I read it cover to cover. I can't wait. And sometimes life gets in the way. You know, I mean, we don't all have large segments of available time, discretionary time. But Ad Astra is probably the best and the biggest magazine that I've run across for space enthusiasts. And the other society that I participate in is the Planetary Society, and they're more into exploration and less on the human presence. But even there, you learn things from what they have done and what
they
NASA
do great
is
policy
doing.
work too. But we met a few people from the Planetary Society a while back who were just actively involved in legislating for policies that would be
That's right.
positive.
Yes.
Awesome.
And the National Space Society does that too with their usually in March, they have a flurry of activity, and where they go to the congressmen and senators and basically educate them. So that is very important as well, because we need to keep them focused on where our interests are, I guess, right? So, yeah.
So as we're wrapping up today, just for the sake of time, where can our listeners go? Is there a website for National Space Society that you want to share, and we'll link in our show notes? Or
yes, it's space.nss.org. Start there. And if your listeners should forget what to type in, they can just type in NSS, and the National Space Society has links out there that will pull them in. But yeah, the National Space Society is as far as I'm concerned, it is world class, and it's one of the best out there, and I think the best. And if that doesn't suit their fancy, the other thing that they can do, let's suppose that they're more into the science and less into the human side of things. Well, they can go to the NASA website, and you can get lost in the NASA website. I mean, there's more there than you can possibly use.
It's a full-time job.
Yeah,
it's a full-time job.
Well, and for our future listeners too, I know that National Space Society has the Space Edge Academy that they've been working on. Lots of lesson plans available for students ranging in age, even from kindergarten all the way up through high school.
That's
Mr.
right.
Eagerly, we are at the end of our time, but we are so grateful for you to kind of spend your afternoon with us today. And I know that Kevin looks forward to, you guys will see each other at some meetings again soon, but thank you so much for spending time.
Thank you.
You're very welcome, first of all, but I got to say that thank you also for the opportunity to be here and to share my enthusiasm. And by the way, Kevin, you touched on something earlier about the Wernher von Braun Mars mission. It turns out there's a book out there that basically captures his vision. And I got to say, from what we now know about Mars, it's a good thing we didn't do it that way.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. We might have killed a few people.
That's
Thank
right.
you. Yeah.
That's
Thank you so much.